and sharing our stories, opening up to one another so that we can be Christ in the world today. You know, when we light the Advent candle on this first Sunday of Advent and throughout the Advent season, well, not only are we saying that there is hope, joy, peace, and love in this world, but what we're also saying is that that light of Christ cannot go out. That light of Christ should be transferred from that candle into our hearts, into our lives, so that we can be that light in the world today. And we do that not by pretending that everything is wonderful, but we do that by opening up to one another and sharing our pain. How many times have you found that when people have been able to open up about their pain, it's given you the vulnerability to open up about your own pain and to open up about your own journey? And how cathartic it is when we suddenly realize that we can do something about the pain that there is in our lives. Hope in the midst of loss. I want to tell you, yesterday when I received the news of Christine's passing, it had a tremendous effect on me, a huge effect on me. Now, for a number of different reasons, and none of which I need to go into today, but it had a tremendous effect on me. Christine is someone who I grew to love in a very real way. Just as I love so many of our transgendered sisters and brothers who are a part of our congregation. But Christine was, I don't know, somehow became the spokesperson in so many different ways. And I want to tell you that I think that was the most painful part for Christine. And we're going to hear a little bit more about that later, so I don't want to go into that this morning. But the reality is that the reason why it became even more personal for me yesterday was because I received the news just as I was leaving to conduct a funeral service for an employee at the city of West Hollywood. And suddenly everything, you know, as professionals, especially as those who have to conduct worship services, you know, sometimes you get yourself into that zone. And if you don't know what that means, I'll but you get yourself, Brad, you know, don't you? Thank you. But you get yourself into that zone of, you know, that for that moment you have to be the pillar of support for the folks who are around you. And, you know, you can't allow too much emotion to get to you because, they're expecting you to stand up and give words of inspiration. And if you're a blubbering wreck, when you're giving words of inspiration, it's a little difficult for them to find their hope in the midst of loss. And so, I spend a little time even before coming on Sundays, just to prepare myself for the day. And yesterday I was preparing myself for this memorial service. Somebody he was the director of economic development for the city of West Hollywood, worked for them for 11 years, and him and his partner had been together for 28 years. And so, I was getting myself prepared because not only did I know this person, not tremendously well, but many of the staff at the city of West Hollywood, of course, I know extremely well. And I knew that I would need to be the pastor to them in that moment. And so yesterday when I received the news of Christine's passing, I fell apart for a second. And fell apart in a way that I then had to reach out and tell others, because the last thing I wanted was for Susan and for Amy and for Winter and for Ina and for others in this congregation to hear that news through the LA Times and not through a personal contact, and Reverend Pat and Reverend Alex and Sebastian, some of us who have surrounded Christine, and for me too. Thank you. But I didn't want them to have to hear it through a news wire. And so as I'm getting myself dressed and through my own blubbering and then having to dash out to my car, it was literally as I was leaving, I was able to call some of these folks and just say, I don't want you to hear it this way. But you get yourself into that zone. Loss. It's not easy. It's not easy. And I look back in my life, I've been a pastor for nearly 21 years now. And during those AIDS years, those AIDS pandemic years, I remember the funeral after funeral after funeral after funeral, memorial service after memorial service. I remember one Saturday conducting 3 memorial services in the same chapel And what was so harrowing about that was that the people who came to the first memorial service were the same people that were at the third memorial service. And the loss that many of us have felt. I sometimes feel that the gay community, the LGBT community, our straight allies and friends who are amongst us are still grieving those years. And somehow I think that we're in denial about those years because we've had so much loss. You know, so many have said to me, you know, if you look around our community, it seems like there's a whole generation that's now missing. And that whole generation is here, those mentors, those the older folks that we were able to be with this past week, and the younger generation, but there's this missing generation that is just gone from our community. So much loss that we've had to deal with. And Christine's passing, I believe, just brought up all of those other losses to me. I'm sure it was about Christine, don't get me wrong. But the reality is that when we have another loss, it just reminds us of all the other losses that we've had in our church, all the other losses we've had in our lives, all the other losses that continue to be a part of who we are. And here we are as Christians having to offer hope in the midst of loss, offer a word of encouragement in the midst of loss. And how do we continue to inspire one another? And I want to tell you, the thing that keeps me going, keeps me believing, keeps me moving one step in front of the other is you. So, honestly, there's nothing else that could do it, because what I see in you is the hands and the feet and the love of Jesus Christ. What I see in you is Jesus Christ made manifest in the world today. What I see in you is the way in which you reach out to one another in the midst of people's loss. You know, those times when you tell me, you know, I don't know why it is, but I was just on my way home and I felt I needed to phone somebody. And you know, those moments that you get, those moments of inspiration, I believe that's the moment of Christ talking through you. That you really are reaching out and instead of ignoring that and just passing on because there's so many other things to do in the day, but you pick up that phone. And how many of you have had this experience when you just pick up that phone and you reach out and you say, I don't know what it was, but you were just on my mind right now. And the person on the other end of the phone says, I really needed your phone call. I really, really needed your phone call. That's the hope that we get to be.